How's it going, informatics professionals? My name is John Manning. I'm double boarded in emergency medicine and clinical informatics, and I'm here as a part of AMIA for continuing medical education to teach you how to make apps. We will be using a UI toolkit called Flutter, which works for both Android, iOS, and actually web now. A bit about me. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. I am a part of Atrium Health, specifically Atrium Health's Carolinas Medical Center within our Department of Emergency Medicine. My official titles now are Assistant Professor and Director of Clinical Informatics. At this stage in my career, I am unfortunately a doctor who codes rather than a coder who doctors. So for those of you that are pretty advanced in terms of dev, I would consider this a primer. For those who are just getting into this or who are interested, this is more of a basic to slightly intermediate course, and hopefully this will be useful for you and at least get you, make you want to learn more. One disclosure that I have is that I did start a company with some friends based on user-centered designs for healthcare providers that harnesses Flutter as our dev platform and builds the ideas themselves through Sketch. What I will say is this lecture is an asynchronous remake of a live coding session that I gave at AMIA's 2019 Clinical Informatics Conference earlier in May 1st, I believe, in Atlanta, Georgia. It was a 2-hour session where we took the app from the conference itself, and we remade it in 2 hours for a bunch of people who had, many of them, never heard of Flutter itself. And I used all out-of-the-box stuff, with the exception being I just grabbed the banner from the website. Today, when we remake it, we'll actually use the we'll use this logo. And I didn't include the advertisement just to show you how some of the other parts of the widgets themselves worked. And I showed you how to repeat the same stuff over and over again, though you can certainly tailor it to the actual event stuff themselves. From there, I provided my slides. Here, I will still provide my slides. The bit.ly link is bit.ly/Flutter4CME, all lowercase, and the code on GitHub can be from this bit.ly link, amia-demo-flutter. If you are not a fan of using bit.ly links, you are absolutely welcome to, well, write all of this down or just check the notes. If there's an article that I mention in the conference itself or things along those lines, you'll be able to see the reference in the notes section as well. If you're interested in contacting me later, please by all means, follow me on social media or direct message me, or I'm happy to chat either at Dr. June, J-U-U-N, or my email address, john.manning@atriumhealth.org. I will also mention that Flutter study group I am a part of. It is a closed Slack community with a lot of people that are serious about dev in Flutter, and a lot of the people that are creating and updating Flutter itself. It's just really a nice privilege. We have a lot of public resources as well: Gitter, Discord, Reddit, Stack Overflow, and their YouTube series is excellent. If any of you are interested in taking Flutter seriously and through the next level, let me know, and I'll be happy to try and get you in the private Slack community as well. This entire series will be broken down into 3 parts with a total of 8 lectures. And the first 2 are essentially an introduction. The next 2 are the very, very basics, the next 3 are the very basics, and the final 3 lectures, 6, 7, and 8, are a bit of an intermediate that builds from the basics themselves. They follow a set path, so as I show you, how to get started and how to get things installed, we're going to take things very, very simple for what are the most common widgets and why are they so powerful. Then I'll explain what lists are, or arrays, and I'll give a lead in as to why you should be at least considering your app's architecture so that we can then make the widgets easier to use and easier to see, and so that it doesn't just look like a giant nested tree. And then building from lists will show you how to harness that in a very powerful way. And then finally, lecture 8 will talk about how you manage state, which is how the data is stored, and we'll show you at least a little bit as to how you can make additional pages. It's not that hard, but for today we're really just going to be making one page in this workshop. So let's get right into the introduction. And I will start by explaining that Dart is a C-style language that was created by Google, and it is used for the portable UI toolkit called Flutter. Flutter has only been out officially as version 1.0 since December of 2018, though it was released earlier that year, I believe February. And Flutter itself has 4 tenets. They want you to make beautiful apps. They want the end users to be very productive as developers. They want that app itself to run very quickly and fast, and everything here is completely open source. So, Flutter isn't the only codebase that allows you to make Android and iPhone apps. But it's new, it's fast, it's unique, and it's gaining in popularity, so it's worth looking into. This is an older slide. It would be, I do have more updated figures in terms of just how many GitHub stars they had, and their community has continued to grow. It's a pretty cool system. When you look at any of the main, the question is it better to make apps in the native language for Android and for iPhone, or is it better to use a single code platform so that you can manage both things together? And if you're using the first approach with native code in Android, you're going to be programming either in Java or the newer Kotlin. And if you're working on iOS, you may still be programming in Objective-C, but probably you're going to be using the newer Swift. And the language itself is what directly accesses the widgets for the, for draw events and, how things are shown in front of you. And the language itself is how you access the various Bluetooth and camera and sensors and other services you need. React Native and other similar ideas, you have whatever language you use, and then a bridge that will access the native widgets so that they can draw events and things like that. And that is essentially the motif that you'll see in a cross-platform approach. You have whatever native code that you're doing your language in, and then something that acts as the bridge so that it can talk with the original language to build that. This is often a bottleneck, and this is why things used to look a little bit slower when you saw the app first loading, or if you try and load it on older hardware, how there's a little bit of extra load time before the app itself will run. It's often because of the bottleneck that occurs right here. Flutter is different, and the Medium article that I'm referencing with these images that you can see in the show notes, or in the PowerPoint notes, uses this term, and I just love it. For business logic, UI, and drawing to the screen, Flutter just tells the platform framework, hold my beer, I got this. All of the widgets are handled directly by Flutter, and everything you write gets compiled into native ARM binary code. And so that is very, very, very fast, and that's why they're able to guarantee 60 frames a second. They will still use platform channels to access the various services, location, Bluetooth, camera, stuff like that for Android and iPhone, but this is the thing that makes Flutter so unique, one of them. And that guarantees 60 frames a second despite the hardware. For those of you that are interested in a little more detail, look up the Skia Engine, which is also something for Chrome. That is in part why they're able to do this. And it's gaining in popularity. If you look at Flutter from June 2018, just a few months after it was released, to April 2019, number of GitHub stars has gone from 25,000 to about 60,000, and they're getting pretty close to React Native. The Stack Overflow questions also or I guess the point structure. It's also gaining in popularity for them. This website is really, really good, and I'm just going to click on it because I think it's worth you seeing. They have a, we'll skip the ads, okay. They have a really cool comparison of React Native and Flutter, how long they've been out, what their current popularity is, where they're useful in terms of the UI itself, how it works in terms of sharing code, and what it's really, really good for, and what it isn't really the best fit for. I would strongly recommend reading this in detail if you're interested in learning a bit more and are curious if you want to actually build something within Flutter. So why bother? Well, because Hot Reload is amazing. If you've ever seen the old XKCD comic, our programmer excuse for legitimately slacking off, my code's compiling. That was truly unique with Flutter, and it was, I would strongly say, practice changing. React had something that was called Hot Reload, but wasn't the same, and I'll explain what Hot Reload is here in the next slide. They, as of September 2019, have announced something called Fast Refresh, which seems to be a competitor to Flutter's Hot Reload. So, this is technology. Technology changes. Things are always moving forwards. Within Flutter, before I talk about Hot Reload, we also have the idea of a widget. Everything's a widget, and so you'll have a scaffold, which is what the app actually looks like. On the left side, you'll have a widget here, and you'll have a widget here. The bottom part is a widget. Everything is a widget. If there's just one thing you remember, everything is a widget. You will see this a lot. This is Hot Reload. This is the next 3 slides are the only slides that come from my startup, Mayjune, and I actually presented this at a usability and data viz conference up in Boston earlier in the year. And that was my first ever live coding session where I showed people how an app that is running in both iOS and Android at the same time on 2 separate emulators, I could just make a couple of changes to the title, hit save, and the app's still running, and it's showing you what I did. I did 2 other parts here because I think this is pretty cool. I mentioned everything's a widget. Everything here in green is a widget on the far right. And while the app was still running, I added a tooltip just to show this is how we can do it. Again, I just hit save, and you do very little, and it will show you those changes dynamically. Giving this a little bit more power, I actually copied all of these lines of code for this single list tile called reset, saved it, renamed it to cake, changed the icon, changed what happens when you tap it, and then hit save, showed that it will actually launch a URL. And when it launches out, it looks like an iOS app or like an Android website. Okay, so let me, as the final part of this introduction, show you how you can find the resources that will be useful for you. And really, if you wanted to start, you're either going to start at dart.dev or flutter.dev. That's what I would probably suggest. I'm just going to show you the web page itself, and this web page will update, I'm sure, depending on whenever you are looking at it, but this is the current as of October 2019. The language tour from Docs will show you everything you need to know about the language, and it has some really good concepts over on the right side, but this is every keyword you need to know about Dart. That's all Dart is. This is it. Flutter also has some really, really good examples, and this very, very basic introduction to Flutter is also worth your time if you're trying to figure out if this is something you want to further look into or not. And what I'll point out is they reference an article where in Java you had 170 files or 180 files and 12,000 lines of code. To do the exact same thing within Dart, 31 files, 1,700 lines of code. It is a very cool language. Here's the cliff notes, so you don't have to read everything. This is C style, so if you are familiar with Java or C or R or Swift or any of that, this is a very typical C-style object-oriented language. Everything is an object. It's object-oriented. At the end of the lines, you need a semicolon. To start, you never have to call a new variable or method or anything as new. It just knows. If it's the first time it's ever been instantiated, you don't have to call it. The variable itself, if you want a private one, then you just put an underscore at the start of the name and it will automatically decide that. And you can call your variables as just var, or you can go all the way over to actually call it a string or int for integers, or things along those lines. Dynamic, and this is a little bit more for like the arrays themselves. An array is called a list, and if you have an array or a list of things that aren't just integers, as an example, like maybe you have an integer and you have a string and you have a decimal or something along those lines, you can just call it as dynamic and it will put all of those into that array. So for those who are more interested in resources and guides, the Flutter team worked with the App Brewery to create a course that you can download and watch for, or you can watch for $10. It's not that expensive. I have not done that. I did a couple of Udemy courses and I enjoyed them. There are courses on Udacity. Each of these is usually like $10. There's a lot of really good YouTube websites that you can watch, where you can even watch people speed code and see what those ideas are about. Buyership tends to be some of the highest quality YouTube-based resources that I've seen, though they do also have a complete guide for Flutter. It's a bit more expensive than these other ones, and I haven't tried it, but each person is different in terms of the way that they learn, and if you enjoy this primer, then look into this more. Let's take a break, and then after that, I'll show you how to install Flutter on a Mac